you're welcome to Talking Point on 4U Media Africa, where we discuss matters shaping the African continent and the globe at large. Today we shall be turning our focus to Cameroon, where the nation reaching potential yet grappling with critical questions around governance, youth inclusions and reforms is our topic of discussion of the day. With over 70% of its population under 35, is Cameroon doing enough to engage its young people in policy making across the nation? What reforms are needed to strengthen its democratic institutions? And how can the country unlock a full potential of its citizens? Those are the questions we shall be focusing on today. Joining us with our expert, we shall unpack today's topic of discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome on board to stay with us. Hello, beautiful audience of 4U Media Africa. It's always a pleasure to be in your company, and this day we shall be focusing on Cameroon, a mineral-rich country as well as potential-rich nation. And of course, we shall be asking our questions around policy reforms, youth inclusion, as well as unlocking the democratic potential of the nation Cameroon in the course of today's edition. Meanwhile, to discuss this at a very critical moment when the country will be heading to the polls come October 2025, it is imperative to analyze the fact that the youth have a very, critical and important role to play in shaping the nation's future. Meanwhile, our guest of the day is Mr. ELVIS BANEH, the Secretary General of the Popular Actions Party, and he doubles as a political analyst. You're welcome on board, sir.
Thank you very much.
Now, to debut this very critical issue, because you one that masters the political as well as landscape, if I may say, political landscape of the nation Cameroon. Now, from your perspective, how engaged is Cameroon's youth in shaping the nation's democratic future?
Okay, if we want to talk about the engagement of the Cameroonian youth as far as shaping the democratic landscape of the country or the political landscape of the country is concerned, I would rather say it is somewhat timid. Timid because the Cameroonian youth are somehow discouraged about the way politics is being played in the country. The Cameroonian youth are somehow discouraged by the fact that they are not included, they are marginalized when it comes to governance, when it comes to leadership. The Cameroonian youth feel like a handful of some octogenarians have hijacked the entire system, and they have been rather relegated to the background, and the country is being led through nothing else but slogans, and they have perhaps waited for a very long time, and but have not seen any possibility of them taking over leadership since they have been distanced from it. But it doesn't, however, cancel the fact that as the days pass by, as the years go by, more and more of them are trying to begin to think otherwise and are trying to join. But what I'm saying here is that the percentage of those who, as of now, are somehow fully conscious as to the fact that they are supposed to be politically engaged, the percentage is still that too low, as opposed to, when you look at Cameroon, over the 60% of the Cameroonian population is made up of the youthful, of the youth who are below, let me say, 35, but when you look at that age range, you hardly see people of that age who are really engaged, be it into civil society or politics per se. So I think that there are few who are engaged, who are willing, who have understood the need for them to get politically engaged and get involved in the political lifestyle of their country. But the majority are those that are still to gain that consciousness and to join.
Exactly. Now, when getting or listening to you, there is this question I have in mind. Though we have a young population in Cameroon, there is always this restraint when it comes to engaging in matters that will lead to democratic progress. Now, with your observation, you are one of those that always call on the youth to actively engage in taking up action to get included in causing reforms or bringing about reforms in the nation. From your perspective, how can youth inclusion be improved so that it could lead to more, it could foster more growth across the country?
Well, if we want to talk about youth inclusion in Cameroon, like I say, it all depends. It goes back to the policies that the regime in place,
Absolutely.
that the leaders that be, the authorities that be, need to put in place. And when we talk, of course, about policy, we are referring here simply to some sort of should I say, a roadmap, some sort of a guideline, you see, that can permit us attain certain objectives. But the question now at hand is, the regime in place as of now, do they actually have as objective to enable to have the youth engaged in politics? I don't think so. So in other words, the authorities that be are not doing anything to have the youth engaged, because they are conscious that if these youth do engage, they certainly will militate for them, you see. So they rather prefer to do things in such a way that the youth rather feel discouraged and feel like it is not their place to want to get it. They believe that they can succeed by trying other avenues, but not necessarily getting towards politics and leadership. But now, if I should answer your question as to the things that we could do to be able to get the youth interested, the very first thing will be at the level of the reforms. What are some of the necessary reforms that need to be done? Let's go back. This is an electoral year, for instance. We need electoral reforms in the country, you see. And for these electoral reforms, we need people who are conscious. We need people who are who have that political maturity to understand that they need to engage, that they need to participate fully as citizens. Unfortunately, Sharon, you know, it is difficult to even get the electoral reforms come, because the reforms will not come in through the present regime in place. Because if they could bring in those necessary reforms that we all know the opposition leaders have been asking for, they will be shooting themselves on the leg. So what happens is this: we rather need to educate the youth to understand that as Cameroonians, we need to get other strategies to, first of all, put this government out of place, the regime out of place, before we can now see how we can reform the system and ensure that maybe when future elections come up, every other person goes in and the field is level grounded for every other person. Now, secondly, we talk about the system, the form of the state. The regime in place has been insisting on the so-called decentralization, which has failed because they have remained a centralized, a hyper-centralized state. But we know, for instance, that even if we were to talk about decentralization, it is just an arm, it is just a branch of a federal system of governance. Why don't we go for a federal system of governance? This again to tell you that the regime will not accept a federal system of governance, because they know that by going in for federalism, they will be giving full powers to the citizens, and the citizens will be the ones who actually determine what they want. The citizens will have the power to live life the way they want it, orientate policies or bring about policies, and do things the way they feel will make them live as though they were citizens in a country. But again, this is something that will not happen if we have to depend on the regime. So on the contrary, what I would tell Cameroonian youth as far as 2025 is concerned is that we need to go in for massive registration on the electoral list, because we need to first of all ensure that Mr. Biya Paul and his octogenarian of friends, they are out of place for us to be able to do the needful.
Now, listen, you equally mentioned that, you know, the policies in the country might have issues. Now, given that we have, like you mentioned, the policies already put in place are not nurturing or not creating an atmosphere or environment where we can be able to champion this growth we are talking about, do you share the opinion that there is need for policy reforms, and how can that be done?
I think I already just mentioned that we need reforms.
True.
We need policy reforms. Because when you have the policies, like I said, the policies are like a plan of action.
Exactly.
The policies are like a guidelines leading to certain objectives. You see, so it is very, very normal. It is capital that we're going for policy reforms. And when we talk about policy reforms, I started mentioning some already. Let's take the issue of let me just take the media. You are a media person. If we take media freedom and civic space, these are things that we really do not have in this country. It is true that people go on media like some of us and we talk, but the truth is that the distance between what we go on air and say and your freedom after we've said it is very, very tiny. You see? So those are some of the things that frighten some people even from getting to politics. When you go out there as an investigative journalist and talk with Cameroonians, you understand that people have things in them to say. but they sometimes simply fear because they are not too sure of what may happen to them thereafter they have said what they have to say. Why? Because that freedom is not actually there as it is made, as we are made to understand. Secondly, even if we go to the judicial system, there is no freedom at that level. It is not independent. Sometimes decisions at the level of the judiciary in our country are, should I say, they are teleguided, they are telecommanded. You have judges who sit in their offices, in the courtrooms, and they pass judgment based on phone calls. They receive phone calls to know exactly what sentence maybe could be given to A or B. We know of cases that have never been resolved in this country before. If we take the cases of people like the Wazizis, like the Zogos and the Balas, if you take the case of even the recent case of Matisse, the baby that was killed, it's true they will tell you that the culprit is behind bars so far, but that is not justice yet. We are still really already waiting to know the outcome, the sentence that will be inflicted on the murderer, for instance. So all these are some of the things that need to take into consideration. I just mentioned the issue of the form of the state. We believe that a federal form of system is the best form of governance that we can give Cameroonians, because when you give them a federal system of governance, what you have simply done is you have given the people the right to sit and reflect, think. How do I put it? They try to x-ray what their problems are, and they themselves propose the way forward as to how they can be able to resolve their problems and feel comfortable in such resolutions. We shall no longer have to be in that situation where people sit down in your window, decide for you when you are thousands of kilometers away, and they cramp it down on you, and you just have to accept. So these are some of the things that need to take into consideration for Cameroonian youth to actually feel that they belong. And all these decisions in the policy, we must understand the need for what? Genuine inclusion. The youth need to be part of their system. Look at our presidency. Look at the National Assembly. Look at the Constitutional Council. Look at the Economic and the Social Council. All these are people who are above 80 of age. You see, you look at all major offices in this country when it comes to politics and leadership, all of them are above 80 of age. Where therefore is the relay? There is no relay party in this country. The guys think about themselves first, they think about themselves second, and there is never any room for the youth. And all of this have rather turned out to push the youthful generation to think that the only thing they can do is to try their luck across the desert, trying to trek across the desert, trying to swim over to Europe, across the ocean, because they feel that they can only get greener pastures for themselves if they leave the nation.
Now, we are trying to, create a pattern between all these terms, Mr. Engineer. Moreover, though there is this dire need, this urgent need for Africa or Cameroon in particular to have, youth actively engaged in shaping the democratic future, the call for accountability within the nation, Cameroon, we equally have this issue of patriotism. Where does it play? Because if Cameroon has to, you earlier on mentioned, and it is a fact, that come October 2025, it would be a critical moment, in shaping the future of Cameroon. So with all the stakes, with everything that is happening across the nation, where does patriotism stand, in ensuring that at the end of the day, we are not just having Cameroonians that are just thinking that tomorrow can be better, but we have Cameroonians that will take the right step in ensuring that the nation becomes great.
Well, it's rather unfortunate, Sharon, that you cannot successfully talk patriotism in a country where they have lived dictatorship for the past 43 years. You cannot successfully talk patriotism in a country where there are people in this country who are 43 years old and they have known just one system of governance, they have known just one head of state. You cannot successfully talk patriotism when there are people in this country who were perhaps 8 years when Mr. Biapol took over power and are about 51, 52 years of age today, and they know nothing else but Mr. Biapol. What am I saying? What I'm saying here is this. We have an educational system already first that misaligned with the realities of our times. And it is something which is deliberate. Deliberate because in that educational system, we have very little that is said or done about civic education. Children go to school nowadays, They get up to university levels, but they do not have any idea about what civic education is actually all about. They know nothing about what patriotic law for a nation is all about. So that is one of the reasons why it is difficult for many of them to engage into politics. Many have been brainwashed to think that politics is a dirty game, when in reality, what is dirty are the people who play the game. You see, but they make the youth feel that when you get into politics, it's a dirty game, so it is not an environment for them to get into. Why? Because those who are in power know that by so doing, by giving out such wrong education, they permit you to stay off, you see, their path, and so they stay in government and continuously remind you that you are not yet ready, you are not yet mature enough to take over governance. That's why you see some of us, like at the level of the PAP, we spend time trying to educate the youth, trying to let them understand the need, why they need to engage into the political lifestyle of their country. It is a civic right, for instance, for people to have voters card and to go for elections. Having a voters card and voting does not make you partisan. Exactly. It does not make you a politician. But Cameroonians don't even know about that. Many just feel that by going to vote automatically you become a member of a political party or something of the sort. And since to them, they have been made to know that it is something bad. It is a game for bad people, or for people who have stained their hands. Many run away. So I want to think that when you ask about the place of patriotism in this country, it goes back to our educational system, a system that has failed Cameroonians and has failed the future, a system that has failed the nation. But like I say, unfortunately, it is something that is done on purpose. That is why you will see, for instance, that at the level of the Popular Action Party and the Union for Reconstruction, that is the coalition that propels Barrister Cameroon as candidate, we are letting Cameroonians understand that the moment we take part in October, one of the first things we are going to do will be to review institutional reforms, review the educational system. All these things will need to come back, because when you are a leader, you need to start preparing the young generation, because you have to be conscious as to the fact that you are there today, but someone else will need to take over from you tomorrow. But you cannot be a leader who doesn't prepare the youth for an eventual takeover, and then when time comes when you are supposed to go, you say, no, they are irresponsible, they are not yet ready. No, it doesn't work that way. So there's going to be a need for institutional reforms. When we took over power with Barrister Cameroon in 2025, we make sure the right person occupies the right offices. We make sure that the electoral code, like we were just saying, is reformed, and that a code is offered to Cameroonians where, when they organize elections, they are free and fair and everybody can go in free. We make sure the constitution of the country is reviewed, and we make sure that at the level of education, the system is revamped in such a way and different ideas brought in such that children go to school like it used to be in the yesteryears. You go to school and they come out knowing that when you are found, or when you are even lost in the middle of the forest and you hear a bird chirping the national anthem, you stand at attention until it sings it through all through before you can walk.
Yeah, it's true. We're not talking about, politics, but then we have to discuss the in-depth, because at the end of the day, it's all about shaping the way forward for our nation, Cameroon. Now, you earlier on stated in your previous response that there is this need for the young Cameroonians to be educated of the need for them to actively engage in deciding or shaping the future of the nation. Now, looking at this aspect of education, I was listening to the conversation today, and someone said that the education system needs to be revamped. It's true. It's no news, and that boils down even to Cameroon. Now, with that said, do you think, what roles do schools, the media, and others play in ensuring that at the end of the day, the education system is preparing Cameroonians to engage meaningfully, in governance as well as the future of the country?
I will still remind you again, Sharon, that when you talk about the role played by schools, I'm an educationist, you see.
Exactly.
Sometimes the things that we teach children, for instance, when I go to class to teach my children, I can take 5 minutes of my time to conscientize them on certain things.
Exactly.
You see. But what we are saying is that what is actually put in the school curriculum that is supposed to be taught the children is virtually empty. So somehow, if schools need to stick only to what they have been asked to teach the children, then the children will certainly not be taught anything meaningful. And the schools normally are not supposed to go out of what they have been prescribed to do by the ministries. or by the state of Cameroon. You see, that's where the problem lies. Sometimes we may want to blame the schools, but if the schools have to stick just to what they are supposed to do as dictated to them by the state of Cameroon through the ministries of be it basic or secondary education, then you realize that the content that we give the children is virtually empty. So sometimes we even have to borrow from what we learned when we were in school back, and we give to the children nowadays as some sort of advice as to how they can live in the community with people, as to how they should perceive their countries. Come to think of it, let me take simple examples. When you are in a country where the state tells you you cannot beat a child, you cannot ask a child to kneel down, you cannot ask a child to go out of class because it's counterproductive. In fact, everything they tell the children is, or the authorities is, you cannot, and they remind the children every now and then that those are their rights. But without ever telling the children what their duties are vis-a-vis the state, what we expect at the end of the day. You understand why nowadays children can boldly beat teachers in school, stab some to death, fight with their friends, stab some to death, fight with parents at home, insult people in the community, get themselves so indulged into drugs. But at the end of the day, we go out there and we cry foul. But we are crying foul because we have all become victims of what we have put in place for our children. That is the type of educational system we have put in place for the children. Children are being, we go out, let me say, to Europe, we copy things out there that maybe work for their own context, and we bring them and we want to paste in a context where it cannot apply. And at the end of the day, we are victims. But like I say, unfortunately, the real victims are just you and I. Because those who are in government, they do not suffer anything. Because at the end of the day, because you have grown up to become a delinquent, thanks to their educational system they put in place, it permits them to maintain their grip in power. So that's what we are saying. And that's why I keep saying that even when we talk about revamping the educational system, it will certainly not come from this regime. That is why there is a need for a change of government. There is a need for some new blood to take over the leadership of this country. There is a need for someone with that moral integrity, for someone who knows exactly what it takes for Cameroon to evolve from where we are today, for things to happen. And that is why I'm sorry to constantly repeat that on your platform. So we are not here for a political campaign, but I need to have to let Cameroonians know. That's why we think that in 2025, Cameroonians need to align behind Barrister Kerimuna, because he is that person who will be able to put forth the reforms that we need in this country alongside his transitional government, and then we see how this will look like 5 years hereafter.
Indeed, we look forward, to, at the end of the day, it's just to ensure that Cameroon lives up to expectations and Cameroon becomes a greater nation. Now, aside holding elections in the country, aside ensuring that we have youth inclusion, aside trying to get the youth engaged in politics, decision making, and with other things, we have other sectors in the country. But then, what else is necessary to ensure that Cameroon can, unleash this potential which it's often said the country has? Education. I don't know if there's anything much I should say with respect to that. We have the potential. That is something we cannot deny. We need to unleash that potential, but the potential, first of all, depends on the quality of education we put in. You see, so, like people will tell you, garbage in, garbage out. Yes. If you give input education to the people, if you teach people only how to read and write, you will not expect that they should come out and begin to reason and think thereafter. Exactly. You see, but our system remains the poor educational system that we inherited since 1884 from King Leopold, which they handed to the missionaries to Africa. A system where they made it clear that the intention was to teach our African population just how to read and write, but never to how to think, never how to reason. We need to grow beyond that and bring in a new system of education where people can reason, where people can think, where the end objective is not the diplomas that people graduate with, but what they can be able to do. That is what builds a nation. Secondly, when the children go to school, when the youth are educated and they can now reason, they need to be included into the decision making in their country. They need to be included or considered when it comes to policy making. They should be included in every other sector and sphere of the life of the country, be it in economics, be it in politics, be it in leadership, in every other sector. We cannot grow a country by marginalizing and sidelining the youth full population. It doesn't work. It is a matter, like I say, it's a relay. Today we are youthful, tomorrow we grow old,
And when you grow old, there must come a time in your life, be it willingly or not, when you must be able to hand over the baton, because the energy is no longer there, and sometimes even your faculties begin to fail you. But if you have old people in government who have been there for 40 years, 50 years, and they continue to make believe that they are the most intelligent in the country and the only who can lead a nation, then I think there is a problem. So when you ask that question, my dear, I can only tell Cameroonians and tell you, your audience, that the first thing we need in our country is to review our educational system, and we ensure that the youth, after getting this education, they are also included, or there's just genuine inclusion when it comes to the policy making, the decision making in our country.
And I'm thinking that
we
maybe
cannot
please proceed.
to decide for the young.
I'm beginning to think that maybe at some point we might have to go back by the system of the old, you know, like it's often said, within a community, it takes a village to raise a child. But then I think we might have to go back to our old ways. It's true that times are changing, you know, we might have to align ourselves with the new norms, but having in mind where we are headed, you know, having focus. Now, looking at the current state of affairs of the nation, the youth drive of Cameroon's progress is actually very necessary. And now, from your observation, you have started a lot of points. You went back to the need for accountability, the need for reforms in the education system, and amidst all this. Now, what in your level of expertise is needed? What is that input, aside from education, aside from holding the leaders accountable? What else is that thing that is missing, you know, that could ensure that the youth could take its rightful place in society, in being that driving force which we stated as?
If we leave education aside and we leave maybe inclusion, then I also think that another way to unleash the potential we have in this country is industrialization, transformation. We have agriculture.
True.
They would tell you, for instance, that agriculture is the backbone of our economy. But now, when you drive from out of the major cities like Yaoundé, Douala, all you find are vast
untapped land,
piece of land, arid piece of land. You see, but unfortunately, nothing is being done to valorize them. Nothing is being done, you see, to ensure that the youth are able to at least make some sense out of it. Now, come to think of it, we have people in villages in the center, southeast, for instance, who have plantations. They actually work, they produce, but their produce get bad with them because of lack of roads, farm to market roads. These are some things we need to do. The government, or let me not say the government, when I say the government, it will look as though I'm talking about Mr. Bia's government. They have failed us woefully for 43 years. That is something we can never talk about it again. We need a new government in place. One, that will understand the need for energy, the need for transport, for the transport system to be improved upon, the need for industrialization. And when we talk about industrialization, we are talking about what? Transformation. We cannot grow in a country where we have raw material in excess, and all we do is to export the raw material and then we import finished products. It doesn't work. That has never developed any country. But we should be able to build industries in our country, and then with these industries, we see how we transform the local material and we sell the finished products. By so doing, first, it creates employment. Remember that when you look at the numerous threats we have in our country today, take the northwest, southwest, take the northern regions, some of the youth who got engaged in this crisis, in this, who picked up arms, some of them did that out of desperation because they were unemployed. You see, but why will a Cameroonian youth be unemployed in a country that is so blessed with both human and natural resources? We are mightily blessed, and maybe even the most blessed in the world, if I may say so. You see, but because of bad governance, we have leaders without a vision. We need people who have a vision for the country. You were talking about patriotism. I'm afraid we have leaders in this country who are not patriotic. We have people, for instance, we have seen they hold a major national dialogue in Cameroon, something that concerns Cameroonians, but they run to go and issue a report in France first. You understand that they are working for a foreign government. Their interest is elsewhere. They are working to the best interest of those who place them there, and so they care totally less about the people that they are supposed to be working for. They care totally less about the people to whom they were supposed to be accountable. So you understand that we also need a change at the helm of the state, the leadership. We need a new leadership that is patriotic, that thinks about the people, that breeds Cameroonian, that thinks Cameroonian, and that feels that every decision they take should have the people at heart and have the people at the center of everything.
Well, I am happy listening to you, and of course, it's true. I agree with you that there is need for things to change. But you earlier on, while citing agriculture, we might have youths in Cameroon. I remember on the course of several editions, I've had, experts like yourself that have brought up this issue time without number, that we have people having ideas to take the country forward, but at some point, maybe the system or the policies that are being put in place at some point might be hindering, this youths from going forward with these ideas that they have. So what should be done? You cited agriculture. From your point of view, why is it that we have all this land in the country, and at the end of the day, a country like Cameroon with its own reputation might not be able to use all of the land? And what should be done? Maybe this is a call for the Cameroonian populace, the authorities, maybe, for them to be able to take adequate action so that everything, at the end of the day, like we said, it's, taking the country forward.
Sharon, I will answer you with a question. How many agricultural schools we have in Cameroon? They tell us that agriculture is the backbone of our country. How many of those schools we have in the country?
We have few.
Because that's also a sector where many Cameroonians have been orientated to get into. But now, the few that we do have, those who graduate from there, what does the state put at their disposal to permit them showcase what they have learned in school? Nothing. On the contrary, you realize that some of them who go to school come out with technical knowledge and are supposed to be on the field, put it into practice. They rather transform them into bureaucrats. They appoint them, they get into offices, and then they see them to sign papers. Something totally far away from what they learned in school. The next thing you also understand, like I earlier mentioned, is this. We have an educational system that misaligned with the realities of our times. You see, when you send people to school, like I earlier mentioned, to teach them just how to read and write, someone studies history, psychology, sociology, or whatever, all the G's that you can think of. Come to think of it, remember sometimes, some years back, around 2017, 19, 20, I think, they mentioned something about the triennial plan. And they said one of the objectives was to promote agriculture. How do you get budgets and you are giving to people to invest in a sector where they have no knowledge in that sector? Someone did history and you are giving him money to invest in the plantation. What is the relationship between the history or the sociology you studied in school and the plantation you are now trying to promote him into? Secondly, when you give someone finances for a certain project and there is no follow-up, and what still, someone you are financing in a domain which is not his, what do you expect at the end of the day? So it comes back to one thing, like I earlier said, governance. We have leaders who put in place bad policies with an intention. They put in place a policy through which they will vote a budget that they will come back to embezzle. Because what we understand at the end of the day is that when they tell that there's 102 billion that was put in, for instance, the triennial plan, the idea is ministers sit in their offices, call their nephews, their nieces, who did history, tell them to write something in the name of a project and an NGO, and they will say they have given this person 5 million francs, they have given this 10 million francs, and the money goes to their families. At the end of the day, there is no follow-up. The 100 million is consumed, and at the end of the day, is it 100 billion or so, I don't know. At the end of the day, there is no feedback. What I am saying is this, Sharon, we need a new leadership. That is the utmost we need in this country as of now. Because there is even nothing we can be proposing with the hope that it can triumph under this present regime. They have shown us their limits in everything they can do. You see? So I think that for the country to move forward, there is just that change in leadership that we need first. We need some fresh blood. People who have a new mindset. And then, like I earlier mentioned, we need the issue of industrialization. When people get into agriculture, the government is supposed to at least subvent them, subvent projects, startups. You see, sometimes you even see the areas where they go doing their subvention. You wonder if they are really serious in this country in what they do. And like I say, even the subventions that I give, at the end of the day, there is never any follow-up. to let you know whether it actually prospered or it didn't. So I think that sometimes the problem is not the population, because the population has been misled already, first by virtue of the quality of education that they are given. Secondly, there is no proper follow-up, sometimes even when they try to maybe urge them into doing certain things. We need, you know, human beings by nature are stubborn. And as a state, as a government, when you decide on a policy and you decide on something to be done, you need to constantly be behind the people to ensure that things are being done. Take, for instance, the transport network system in our country. When they tell that they are going to construct a road, Yaoundé Douala, since 2014 or 15, 10 years after or 15 years after, I don't know, we are just about 1/3 of the road gone. And they have spent more than 3 times the initial amount of the amount of money that was supposed to be invested for that project. What do you do? What do you expect? But Cameroonians need those roads. The roads are not there. You see? So it is a government that has failed at every sphere, at every level. And so, like I keep saying, we need a change of governance. We need new blood. And that's why I will keep reminding Cameroonians that 2025 is a year where we should not let it go pass us by.
Indeed, Mr. Engineer. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us, you're on to Talking Point over For You Media Africa. We're discussing this time around Cameroon as the country heads to the polls in October 2025. We have critical questions, a lot of questions, you know, around the table. And today we're talking about youth inclusion. We're talking about policy reforms, as well as how Cameroon can unlock its democratic potential. Now, there's this saying that is often said, Mr. Engineer, that we should train the young leaders to be job seekers, or job creators rather, and not job seekers, which numerous experts have been of the opinion that that is the problem in Cameroon, as well as the broader African continent. Now, looking at all this, last year, if my memory does not fail me, we saw on the occasion of the National Youth Day, President Paul Biya reiterated the issue of brain drain in Cameroon, that more young people are traveling abroad in search of greener pastures, while he was calling them on them getting back to Cameroon, you know, to contribute in shaping the future of the nation, as they have a very crucial role in playing in nation building. Now, back to you. When we have this issue, do you think that the current state of affairs, the current, I'll say, the current Cameroon is harnessing this issue of brain drain in the country? And if that is the case, yeah, it's true you have stated that there is a need for new leadership, there is need for, if I may use your words, fresh blood, like you say. But then, with all this, you know, all these points that we have outlined, do you think that is harnessing brain drain? And how can we go about reversing this? Because like you said, 2025 is a very crucial year in the history of this country. So what is your proposal as far as reversing this issue of brain drain in the country, of more, you know, the mass of young people heading off to other countries in search of greener pastures?
You know, to reverse this situation in the country, Sharon, the only thing is Biya and his regime to leave. And it depends on Cameroonians. And 2025 is the year. October is not far. You know, when we talk on side, maybe Mr. Biya, than stay back in his own country, it is because when the president tells them that they should come back into the country, it is a fallacy. It's a farce, because he is encouraging people to come back into the country, but without creating a conducive environment where they can come in and be inclusive, where they can come in and be included into the policy or decision making, where they can come in and they are maybe, should I say, accompanied in their projects by the state itself. Come to think of it, you have a young Cameroonian maybe who starts up a small business with a 1 million francs or so. And the very first thing that officials in the country will tell him is, if you cannot pay taxes, if you cannot do the best, is they close the business for you. Is that the best way to go? We know what it means to raise a 500,000 francs or a million in this country. But if a young man starts up something, why not try to groom the business with him, give him 6 months, give him a year, or even 2 years for the business to settle before you start taxing him? Why should you close a young man's dreams simply because he started and could not afford taxes? Is that the dream, or is that how the youth are going to grow in this country? Is it that they do not know exactly how to go about these things? People have advised and advised them without number, but I say it is a regime of ill faith. And I continuously insist that the only way we can reverse this situation is to ensure that we vote out Mr. Biya's government from office. That's the least we can do. You see, when we talk about a brain drain, for instance, come to think of it, look at all those who are going. Cameroonians who are currently in the out of the country, in the diaspora, many of them who left against their will have amassed wealth and are willing to come back into the country and invest. They are willing to bring in both material and financial wealth. They are willing to bring in their intellectual resources to invest in the country. But who blocks them? The same regime. They tell you they don't accept double nationality and things of that nature. So what do you expect of them at the end of the day? Some of them never picked up those nationalities out of will. They were conditioned to do so to be able to have access to better jobs out there. But they dream of their homes. They love their nation. They want to come back and rebuild home. But you block them the way. But you keep telling them to come back. Ironically, the same president who tells the youth, come back into the country, at the same time, he takes people like Nganu and presents them to them as heroes. Those are people who went to Europe through the desert on foot. They were not sponsored by the state of Cameroon. So how do you tell young Cameroonians that going out there through the desert is a bad idea, but at the same time projecting to them who people you now call national heroes who went out there in Europe and made it through, and they went through the desert? Does it make sense? That is being very, very inconsistent or inconsistent as on the part of the head of state. So this is just to tell you that the regime is one that has fooled Cameroonians for 43 years, and I want to think that if they will still fool us this time in 2025, then the problem should be Cameroonians and no longer the regime in place. So to me, when you ask what we need to do to reverse the situation, Cameroonians have the power. Let me presume that they voted Mr. Biya into office and he brought his ministers and his directors and have dealt with us for 43 years. We have the power as the people to vote them out of that office and hand that mandate to some other person. We cannot keep cultivating the same piece of land year in, year out, and it's not yielding fruits, and we are insisting to stay on that piece of land, planting the same crops and expecting that the yield will change. So I think Cameroonians have become politically mature enough to understand that in 2025, if there is anything that we hope for, that we think can change in this country, the change should begin with the change of the government in place.
Exactly. Now, speaking of the upcoming elections, like you've so much reiterated, Mr. Engineer, if I should reiterate, you're the Secretary General of the Popular Actions Party and political analyst. Now, you have so much reiterated the upcoming elections. Now, do you really believe that the upcoming elections in Cameroon would be a litmus paper or litmus test, for the nation's democratic future?
Well, Sharon, if I didn't believe in that, I wouldn't be encouraging people to go for it. If I didn't believe in that, I wouldn't spend my time and energy traveling from one part of the country trying to talk to people to ensure that they register and that when the time comes to vote. If I didn't believe in it, I wouldn't be, or at least the PAP wouldn't be backing Barrister Keremuna as the next president of Cameroon. It is because we believe that things can change democratically and through the ballots that we are waiting for the elections, and we are encouraging Cameroonians to stand up as a nation and go out massively when that day comes to vote. You see, when we talk about elections, it's a game of numbers. And that's why, because we believe in it and we believe that Cameroonians today, as in 1992, have become more conscious as to the challenges they face and have become more conscious as to the fact that they can change things through the ballot. We therefore think that if we go out there and we register massively, I think in 2025, come October, or should I say, on the at dusk of that day of that month, we shall be celebrating victory in this country and celebrating our freedom.
Exactly, like we're just a few months away, for this decisive moment in the history of Cameroon since the country got independence. But then, looking at other aspects, we are, anticipating like you've mentioned, it's a call for Cameroonians to take the future into their hands, you know, go out massively. Like it's often said, the elections does not begin just on the voting day. It's a process that, you know, it takes place over time, you know, with people getting to register on the voters list and so on and so forth. So it takes years of preparation. Now, with the case of Cameroon, we're gradually coming to the end of today's conversation. But then I would like to find out from you if we have to, you know, chart practical steps in taking Cameroon forward. You know, we've cited education, we've cited going or registering massively on the electoral list, we've cited contributing, like you said, is believing in the vision that we can take Cameroon forward. We've cited a lot of points, agriculture amongst others. Now, what practical steps, with all this said, is needed to bring change to Cameroon? Because I remember we had a similar conversation like this over a year ago and some months back, where we spoke about what is needed to bring change in Cameroon aside the upcoming elections. So what is your take as far as that's concerned?
I cannot talk to you about practical steps on bringing about change in this country without talking about elections.
Elections, of
because
course.
Like, it begins with a change in governance. Because if the regime that is there remains there, then believe me, we are going for the worst of what we are going to experience in this life for the next 7 years. Now, on the contrary, I would say that when we talk about, if you are asking me what practical steps we can take to change the country, I can simply refer or maybe tell your viewers that if we take maybe just if you go into the 8 pillars that the presidential candidate, the next president of Cameroon, Barrister Cameroon, is proposing to Cameroonians, and you take pillar 1 of the 8 pillars, first, it talks about proposing a new constitution to the people of Cameroon. It talks about proposing a new electoral code to the people of Cameroon. And we're going to talk about the constitution and the electoral code. You will understand that he is going just for a one-term transitional mandate. He is not coming in like other candidates to win a 7-year mandate and then maybe renew it. No, he's going for a one-term transitional mandate of just 5 years, where he will work hand in glove with other political leaders and the youth, put in place all the necessary reforms that are needed, consensual. And then at the end of that, he organizes free and fair elections in which he himself will no longer be a candidate. In that case, Cameroonians or the real politicians, let me put it that way, can now go in for the bid, and then Cameroonians vote the person that they think will now lead the country for the next mandate. So there is the issue. We need to review our constitution. We need to review the electoral code and come up with one that is consensual. We need to understand that one of the key things that has crippled this country for the past 42 years or for 3 years is corruption. And that is a fight that Barrister Cameroon has been fighting for over 30 years. You see, and there is no way a country can develop. You and I know, Shabna, there have been years that Cameroon was first on the list, topping corruption for 2 consecutive years, or maybe 3, if my memory doesn't fail me. You see, there is no way you can go in a country where everything is centered around corruption, tribalism, favoritism, where you can only get access to certain services if you know someone who knows another person somewhere. It doesn't work like that in any democracy. We cannot grow in a country where people prosper not out of merit, but because they know people who are in certain offices. So these are things that Cameroonians must understand, that in the next republic, in the new republic that we are fighting for, all these things shall be reviewed. The judicial system, we shall ensure that it is free and fair. People, for instance, will no longer be arrested in my native Oku in the northwest and brought to be judged in Yaoundé in a language that they do not understand at all. You see, all these are things that we shall need to take into consideration. These are all the frustrations that Cameroonians have lived for the past 43 years, and we are saying that in 2025 we need to put an end to all of them.
And we are already in 2025, and of course it's often said that though we are looking forward to implementing all the fresh ideas we've had on deck, it's imperative to start by the grassroots levels. Now, do you think what crucial role does local governments have to play in implementing, some of the key points you've earlier on mentioned?
We can talk about local governments already first. We are already into the federal system. Because if we get into the federal system, the truth is it begins from down there and then it moves up. as opposed to the present so-called decentralized system, when we all know it's a hyper-centralized system, where everything is from the top, and they only impose it to the people down there. The people who actually have the power, the right of decision, are the ones on whom they impose things. Whereas things I just are supposed to live from down there, the people tell them. Let me tell you, when we take over power, when I say we, of course, the Union for Reconstruction with Barrister Cameroon, the first thing we shall have to do is we shall send commissions all around the 360 subdivisions in Cameroon, where the people will enumerate all their problems and what they want, and it is from those bases that we shall have to work. I am not saying this to say that as of now we do not know what the problems of the people are, but we are saying that it is important that before you take any decision and you implement, that has to an impact on the lives of a people, the people directly need to be involved. The people directly need to be consulted. Take for instance, you go to the south and you tell the people in the south that you want to offer them an airport. Let me just ask a question. What is the importance of an airport to the people of the south who don't even have a road going back there, who have their crops getting back in the farms and they cannot sell to make money because they don't have any roads going there? They don't have water, they do not have electricity, they do not have access to health, they do not have access to education, and you are coming to build an airport for them. How does it help them? Did you consult them and they told you that they need an airport? I doubt. So we are saying, when you talk about local government and its importance and or its impact, local governance can only have a voice in this country or in any country if we begin with a system of governance. For instance, federalism, where we know that decisions begin from down there and they move to the top, and not the top sitting in their air-conditioned offices in Yaoundé, deciding what they think is comfortable for them and imposing it on all other citizens.
Now, there's been this issue that has been touching, deep down into Cameroon, but it's not been voiced out so much. The issue of social media and technology, the role of technology in Cameroon society. We've had numerous issues, posts online, amidst others, which I might not go into detail, but you might have had a foretaste of what I'm talking about. Now, every day we talk of youth inclusion in Cameroon, ensuring that the youths, they get engaged in ensuring that they have a voice, they have a say in whatever shapes the future of the nation. But deep down, how can, social media, technology overall, be censored in such a way that it doesn't affect what a nation expects of its youth in championing development across the country?
It first of all depends on what the nation itself expects of the youth.
Exactly.
Or it depends on what the nation itself intends to offer the youth. If you take a country like China, for instance, there are certain search engines that you cannot use if you are in China. There are websites you cannot access if you are in China.
True.
Why? Because they know that giving access to those search engines to their youth will only derail them the more.
Exactly.
So they decide what their youth can have access to, things that are educative. Now, when you come to a country like Cameroon, where pornography is free, where even on the local cable network system, people can distribute images of people practicing homosexuality in movies, and they show it live and children can watch freely at homes. What do you expect? Can you, at the end of the day, blame a child for watching such a movie when you have institutions that were supposed to regulate and censor all what is happening in the country in that area? Come to think of it, when we have a state where officials bring in what they call influencers, and they come and they parade their nude images on social media, is that the type of influence we are influencing our own youth to grow? Is that the direction? So at the end of the day, like I say, our youth are growing just to be a reflection of what the regime in place wants them to be. And I keep insisting on one thing, Sharon, that these things are done deliberately. Why? Because at the end of the day, they will tell you, you see, you are irresponsible, you cannot yet take leadership, so what happens? We are going to stay there while waiting until you get responsible enough. But these are things that were supposed to have been catered for right from the base. So when we talk about social media, there is so much we can learn from social media and learn through social media.
Exactly.
But the idea is the state in itself is supposed to regulate the sector. Unfortunately, we are talking about technology here. The state in Cameroon does not regulate any sector.
So what parameters should be put in place?
So we cannot blame them about the area of technology, for instance. It is a general something, it's a general laissez-faire, and they know why they have left it that way. They know that when they do so, there will be general depravity, there will be general chaos, and so they profit by that. Of course, youth will spend their time watching videos that do not educate them on anything rather than waywardness. And so at the end of the day, where do they find time to start thinking that, but as a young Cameroonian, maybe I could be I could do this or that to lead something in my community. They don't have time for such things because they have given them access to things on TikTok that do not make sense at all. So I think at one point in time, we may want to blame the youth, but like the saying goes in French, tout poisson pourri par la tête. It begins from the top, you see, and if the top does not try to regulate, then of course, when children, do you know that in China, for instance, when a child commits a certain crime in the society, maybe in a school or in a community, the parents themselves are held accountable because they want to believe that you didn't give the child the right education. So while the child is being punished, the parents themselves have their own fine to pay. But now, if you find yourself in a community where the state has just sort of laissez-faire, anybody does what he wants to do, the parents themselves have abandoned. So what do you expect at the end of the day? Let us not blame social media because social media is not the person. You see, it is supposed to be regulated by the state, but the state has failed its responsibility. Parents themselves who have failed. We have children before certain ages to whom parents give Android phones, tablets in the name of they are going to carry out research, but they themselves are never there to control what the children do with those different gadgets. So I want to think that at one point in time, when we talk about technology and what our Cameroonian youth learn from it, it is a responsibility that is general. We all need to have an eye on it and see how it goes.
Exactly, like you said, it's collective. If we have to build a nation that is as great as China, which you cited earlier on, it needs collective efforts from you and I, you know, in ensuring. That's why we have conversations like this to chart the way forward. And now, speaking of which, we have come to the end of this edition, but then we wouldn't go without leaving a few words that will set the ball rolling when it comes to reflection in Cameroon. Like you said, we are 4 or few months away from that critical moments that the nation has been so much waiting for. So what is your take-home message, as far as this conversation is concerned, putting in mind that, or bearing in mind that at the end of the day, we have these conversations because we love Cameroon, we love Africa, and it's to chart the way forward for the nation.
I like the word reflection. And my last words to Cameroonians would be words to push them to reflect. You know, I want to address Cameroonians, especially as Cameroonians as a whole, but Christians in particular. We are in an electoral year. I would say, like many have said before me, if you are praying for change in this country and you do not have your voter's card, please stop the prayers because you are the problem. God will not come from heaven and pull Mr. Biya out of office to place someone else in that office. No. He will only leave that office through the ballot. So people should stop praying for Cameroon for change, for a change of leadership when they do not have their voters card at hand. Let us all go and register. I have said, registering and having a voters card does not make you partisan, does not make you a politician. It is a basic civic right, whether you are a Christian or not. As far as you are a citizen, you need it. Secondly, Cameroonians, when they go to register, I will now talk as a militant of the Popular Action Party and a member of the Union for Reconstruction that has Barrister Akeremuna as the candidate. We should all go back and read again the episcopal letter and read carefully the 10 points that they sent out, giving guidelines as to who the next president of Cameroon should be. And then we shall know why Barrister Akeremuna is just the right person to lead this country within the next 5 years. That's what I have to say, Cameroonians. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Engineer Elvis BANEH. Just to reiterate, you are Secretary General of the Popular Actions Party, and of course, you were contributing equally in your capacity as a political analyst. Thank you immensely for taking our time to be with us on today's edition of Talking Point, though it wasn't for a political campaign.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you. Meanwhile, we would remind our audience that we were talking around Cameroon with policy reforms, the call on need for youth inclusion and Cameroon to unlock its democratic potential. We pray that you learned a lot from today's edition of the program. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. And do have a beautiful day in company of our numerous programs as we've come to the end. Bye-bye.